So good morning, everybody. It is May 3rd, and I'm Regina. We have Angela and Dr. Traci Williams here to talk about financial trauma with us today. And this is for our woven community, and we will have this recording up for anybody who couldn't make it. I know a lot of you are excited about it. As a reminder for me and Angela, we are not financial professionals. We are just money nerds and like to share our thoughts and insights with you. I will let Dr. Traci do her own intro with whatever, what are those things called? I don't know. When you say the
Disclaimers.
things you can, yeah, that. Do that for herself.
It's too
Um,
early
it's
for
too
you.
early. It's 9 o'clock. I'm just getting my coffee in. And with that, we'll hand it over to you, Dr. Traci. Thank you for being here today, and excited to hear what you have to say. It's definitely been a popular topic, and people were excited to watch this one.
Yeah, I am a fellow money nerd, so I am right there with both of you. So I'm Dr. Traci Williams. I am a board certified clinical psychologist. What that means is after my doctorates, I went and got even more letters after my name. That's the basic summary of that. And I specialize in kids, teens, and families. And I am also a certified financial therapist. And most people are like, wait a minute, what's a financial therapist? I've never heard of that. It is a relatively small niche, and it's been around for about 10 years, just a little over 10 years now. And financial therapists can either have a mental health background or a financial background, like a financial planner, and have extra training on understanding the intersection between how we feel about money, how we behave with money, and what we think about money. So yeah, that's basically it for me in a nutshell. In terms of disclaimers, I have no financial interest. I just am here to share what I know. I hold the Women's Personal Finance Group very dear to my heart. I joined when I was at the beginning of my own financial journey. And I think that it is an amazing platform to have available for folks all over the world.
Thank
How
you so
long have
much.
you been there now? I'm curious. How far back
Since
does
the
that
pandemic.
financial journey go?
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's actually a really good point. So there's something called the money scripts. And everybody has a script. And in the chat, as I'm explaining it, you might want to say which one your script is. There is no good or bad when it comes to the scripts, but basically they form in our childhood based on our childhood experiences with money from our parents, from our families, from what's going on around us. One of the money scripts is money avoidance, or so having anxiety when it comes to money-related topics, emphasizing saving. Some people who have a poverty mindset have money avoidance, not paying bills, not paying attention, that kind of thing. Then you have money anxiety, where it's very much I need to make sure that everything is okay. So with those folks, you can see underspending.
Regina, for sure.
Checking bank accounts a lot. Um, Always keeping on top of money. Money is often close to the forefront of the mind. And then the other two are very similar to each other and can be a little confusing to understand. There's money worship. Um, and oh my goodness, I am blanking now. Both of them, you are tying your net worth to money. So I don't feel good unless I am going on Instagrammable vacations and I'm wearing the latest and greatest, and my kids have the latest and greatest. Money status and money worship. There we go. So yeah, there's no good or bad, but with each one of the scripts, there are unique things that we can tend to see. Maura says that they feel that theirs is mostly money anxiety. And so for me, mine was a mix of anxiety and avoidance before the pandemic. Oh, I don't care about money. Not a big deal for me. I wasn't particularly paying attention to what was going on. And my field in mental health, unfortunately, one of the things that is really common is in our training, we're taught that we're doing this to help other people, not to make money. And so it's kind of ingrained, right? With the pandemic was a very interesting experience when it comes to money, as you both know. And during that time, I had a chance to take a look at my own money. And then I realized, oh, wait, I should probably do something about this. So that's how I found Women's Personal Finance. That's how I found financial therapy. And that's how I got involved. Shante is saying mostly money anxiety. The need
I
to
think that would
constantly
probably
check
be a
in.
lot of our
Yes.
audience probably skews that way. If you found your way to a money group, you're probably thinking about it a fair amount.
Yes, exactly. Dawn is asking which one goes with bad at money. So good question. I don't necessarily love the saying I'm bad at money. I wonder if there's not necessarily a script that aligns with that either. What I'm thinking is I wonder what you do with your money. When I hear people say I'm bad at money, oftentimes they are spending without really having a plan. They are ignoring their financial situation. And so that might be money avoidance, or if they're taking it to an extreme in terms of the spending and how they're feeling about the possessions that they have, then that might be money worship or money status. Financial trauma plays a role in this because what financial trauma is experiencing a scary event that significantly impacted how you view money. And for different people, that can mean different things. The pandemic was a traumatic event for the entire world. And for some people, money was a major part of that. People lost their jobs, people were not sure if they'd be able to continue living where they were living, difficulty accessing food, all of that stuff. So that was a financially traumatic event. For other folks, divorce can be a financially traumatic event. Growing up in poverty can be a financially traumatic event. But just because you experience that event, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have financial trauma. Similar to a car accident. If we got into a car accident, one person may be, oh, that was really scary, but I'm okay. And the other person may start having nightmares. So the trauma itself is really in the after effects. How does it affect how you feel in your body when you are facing money issues? How does it affect what you do with your money? How does it affect what you think of money? So for instance, I can give an example from my own practice. I have a client who I'm working with right now, and she struggled with substance abuse and is now in recovery and sober. And she is a high-earning professional, so she makes a lot of money. But previously, because of her substance abuse, that's where the money typically went. And so she is very anxious now when it comes to figuring out how to manage the money that she has because she's not used to that experience. She also experienced job loss in the past. And so there's a lot of anxiety about how long will I have this money? So that's just to give an idea of what financial trauma could look like. As I'm speaking, I would love to get questions from the chat. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. And so I'll pause there for Angela, and you guys can also ask me questions.
Regina, I'll let you go
If you have one, go ahead.
Oh, I was just, it's interesting because some of us didn't grow up with any financial trauma, and yet like a lot of this I still resonate with, and it's really interesting how it's not necessarily even like, maybe I didn't experience the car wreck myself, but I watched it happen. And so I think maybe part of that is because I am a pretty highly empathetic person. And so, um, I've had friends and family members that have really struggled with money and like in money instability. And while, as a young adult, I didn't have a lot of money, my family was a backstop that I could have had. And so it's interesting when you're talking about financial trauma, it's a lot of these things, especially around money anxiety and whatnot, you don't necessarily have to have like a specific event or experience to still feel that deeply, which is
I get
Exactly.
the there. So I guess a question there would be, Dr. Tracy. We all have these money scripts to some degree. Is that some of what you're saying, even without the financial trauma, or is this kind of a way that we try to quantify people who have financial trauma and how that's showing up?
Yeah, so the money scripts are separate from financial trauma. The money scripts are just one way that financial folks understand the behavior of other people. And Angela, you're correct. You don't necessarily have to witness the car accident to experience the trauma. A good example of that is people who grew up with parents who went through the Great Depression. That impacts how you view money and how you view the things that you have or don't have. So yeah, that's a really good point.
So I
yeah.
think a big
And
one that's applicable probably to lots of people would be children of divorced parents then, right? Like
Yes.
seeing the struggles that parents went through with those things. I mean, that I have that in my past, so I don't know. That's it.
And everyone's experience can be different. So for one child, they may grow up to think to themselves, I saw my mom struggle a lot as a single parent, and she lived paycheck to paycheck. I do not want that to be me. And they're hyper vigilant about their money and making sure that they are stashing away as much as they can. And on the flip side, you can have someone who's like, I watched my single mom struggle a lot with her money, and she made it out all right. So I'll just be fine like she was, and I don't really need to be too worried about it.
Oh,
Yeah.
so where those money scripts show up, maybe if you're already an anxious tending person or somebody who's more inclined to avoid, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
that makes sense.
The recession, that's another good example. Thank you, Angela. Yeah, a lot of young adults, and there have been studies that have been coming out from the major financial institutions. I've been involved in a couple of them where they've been looking at Gen Z and millennials and how they feel about money. And it's tough. I mean, if you think about it, there were things back to back with Y2K and the recession and the wars and the pandemic. Like it's just been a lot. So yeah, completely understandable.
yeah, I find quite a few of us, I graduated undergrad in 2009, and I feel like the people that graduated in like 2007 to 2010, especially, have a much deeper money anxiety, concerns about scarcity than um, friends and family that graduated in like 2013 to 2018 seem to have a much more abundance, and positive outlook on the way things are going to go.
Yeah.
But especially, it feels like that small group of us that graduated and, you know, had to fight for a job at a retail store part time have a different perspective on money than those who graduated into a great job market.
Yeah, and unfortunately for you, part of that is the year that you were born. So I don't know if you know this, but each generation has one specific year that for some reason or other, that's when most of the births happen. And there was just an expose done on this. So for your generation, unfortunately, the majority of people in the generation were born within the year that you were born. And so they were all fighting for places at the same schools, for the same jobs. And that coincided with the recession. to create the trouble that it did.
How do we find out what years that?
I think it was like
That is-
1987, 88.
Is it 87? Because I'm 87, you're 87.
I'm gonna try to find there was a podcast on it.
I
So
remember
I'm gonna
seeing
try to
something
find
about
it.
this in like the last 2 months too, but I
Oh,
don't remember
okay.
the date.
I had not heard this before, but it
Yeah,
does
super
feel like
fascinating.
even within WPF, there are a lot of like 86, 87, 88 folks, including us. So
Yeah. I think that they were talking about the 30 somethings, the early 30 somethings.
we'll have to look it up because now I'm curious. So I'm curious, how did you decide to go into financial therapy? You know, a lot of us are money nerds. A lot of us, you know, the pandemic was a very like pivotal point in people focusing on their money. How is it that like that was the focus you decided to go?
Yeah, so somewhere in my absolute obsession, I kind of went from one extreme to the next. I don't care about money to, oh my gosh, I have to consume every single thing about money that was ever written. And during the pandemic, people were finding things to do. So people were baking banana bread and making candles, and I was learning about money. Um, and in my learning about money, I was also having an experience as a psychologist, seeing people with their money stories right in front of my face. I was working in a clinic at the Children's Hospital here, and because of the shutdown, I had a wide range of experiences. So I had a lot of families I was helping with rent assistance and figuring out food and what's the day for picking up the food from the school for the kids and all of that stuff. And then I also had families who were riding out the shutdown at their vacation beach home. And just that juxtaposition, the difference between the two, as well as other things that we saw. So people really freaking out about the stock market. And then after that, the GameStop and crypto stuff that was going on then, it made me realize that human beings are very, very interesting. Yes, money is dollars and cents, but it's so much more. It is how we feel, how we think, how we behave. And in looking up what those connections were, that's when I found financial therapy, the Financial Therapy Association, and got involved then.
Let's see, reading some of these comments.
Yeah, I was reading that, you know, it also impacts where you graduated and lived post graduation. Mara, you're talking about, you know, you graduated during a decent market, but in a really depressed area where there were no jobs. And that could also be for me also, not only did I graduate in 2009, but I moved to a small town in South Carolina where there were absolutely no jobs. So it definitely deepened my experience. And, you know, now that I think about the people who actually did generally get jobs, even in that time period, we're living in larger cities, which, you know, comes with their own stuff. But
and higher cost of living.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
found, I think maybe the article, it was New York Times, just I think in March maybe, and it was titled "Why It Sucks to Be 33" and pins it as the 1990 to 1991 group. But Angela, if you're considering that the people who went to college were basically graduating into the same job market as the people in that age range who didn't go to college, it's still that time frame, right? Because that's 3-4 years off from where we're at. So I think there's going to be some overlap there.
And your location matters just in general, aside from the job market and graduating from college. If you think about living in the Midwest and the challenges that come with living in the Midwest or having a farmsteading family, if you think about coming from a war-torn country or a country that doesn't have as much resources as we may have, all of those things can shape how we view money and what we do with money.
So we're talking a little bit about what starts people towards financial trauma and some of the money scripts. Can we also jump into a little bit of that, the recovering part and trying to work through those things and come out the other side?
Yeah. So before we get there, one thing that would be really important is to recognize, do I have financial trauma? What would that look like? And it could look like a physiological response within your body. So does your heart start to race? Do you have a hard time concentrating when it comes to looking at your finances, looking at the bills, creating plans, all of that stuff? Do your palms get sweaty? Do you feel butterflies in your stomach? And these are all questions that I ask clients when they're coming in. Physiologically, what do you experience when you think about money? I also ask about emotionally, what do you experience with money? And some of the emotions that get identified are scared, terrified, sad, hopeless, all of that stuff. You may also have recurring thoughts. So having a hard time letting go of whatever that financially traumatic event was, whether it is rethinking being in the court for your divorce, or whether it is rethinking and reimagining being in the environment, the neighborhood that you grew up in, whatever that case might be. Those are indicators that what you experienced was traumatic for you. So what do you do with it? When it comes to trauma, one thing that's super important is learning how to regulate your emotions. And that's just a fancy way of saying getting everything under control. And that can be really hard to do because if you don't know any other way, this is just natural for you. And trying to get your emotions under control can feel really unnatural. The good thing is we live in an age where we have technology and there are lots of things that can help. So there are apps for deep breathing, guided meditation, muscle relaxation. Those are really, really good practices to start doing that can help you with managing strong emotions. I tend to recommend Calm and Headspace the most, just because they're the bigger companies, but there are also ones on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you listen to your music. So that is one way. Another thing that can be helpful is journaling. So getting all of your thoughts out about what the experience was, what you're struggling with, what you're having a hard time with. So you're not just holding all of that stuff in. If you're having a hard time facing your money challenges, one thing that can be really helpful is working with a fiduciary, a financial planner who is out for your best interest and not their own, so that they can hold your hand as you try to figure out what's going on with your money. If that feels too scary, and I have clients who they are not even at that level yet, they are so very scared. Working with a mental health professional, preferably someone who has experience talking about money, so that you can get to a place where you can then work with other providers.
How do you find a mental health professional who has any clue about the money stuff?
Good question.
That feels like a harder person to find, perhaps.
Yes, unfortunately it is. So the Financial Therapy Association has a directory. And what I will say is there are a couple things here. One, unfortunately, a lot of financial therapists do not accept insurance. For me, I am an out-of-network provider, so my clients pay me, and then after they've met their insurance deductible, they can be reimbursed for part of their payment. But some do accept insurance. So that's one place to look, and you can search by your state so that you can narrow down your search, because I think it's like several pages long of a directory. That's one option. Another option is if you are going to find a mental health provider, whether it's through your insurance company or directories like Psychology Today, Therapy Tribe, Therapy Den, there are a whole bunch of them. You can ask them if they are familiar with and comfortable talking about money, and just going into it knowing that some therapists haven't worked on their own money stuff, so they may not be comfortable. And that's another way that you can do it. Another thing that can be really helpful is finding an accredited financial counselor. Maybe this is something y'all can look up to see if they have a directory. I know that there is an accreditation body for AFCs, and they can also do some of that hand-holding and understand the complexities of experiencing trauma. Maura, yes, you can use your HSA to pay for therapy. That's correct.
Is that true for an FSA also?
Not sure.
Just because I know that sometimes people have trouble finding things to spend FSA money on. So if this is something you could spend on, that would be
If you
helpful.
can use it for an HSA, I would assume you can use it for an FSA. Like
Yeah,
they
I
should be
mean,
translatable.
It
yeah,
just seems like paying for, financial therapy
Oh,
may be a better use than,
Mariah has. Thanks,
Oh,
Mariah.
someone's used okay. Yes, you
Is
can
that
use an
there you
FSA.
go.
So, it seems like a lot of times at the end of the year, because FSA money is use it or lose it versus HSA money that can, stick around for the long term, people, when you look at the long lists of like what to spend your FSA money on, it's usually like buy tampons and Band-Aids.
Yes.
Right.
And
I was about to say,
maybe
instead of a year's supply of tampons, perhaps
Exactly.
a financial therapy session.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I just looked it up myself to see what the codes would be. But yes, you can use your FSA. So good to
Keep
know.
keep in mind for anybody who might be doing that often it's that end of year scramble to use the FSA funds. So this is something that would require you being a little bit more proactive. But you could potentially ask a therapist if they can like maybe bill in advance, right? Or like, is that possible, Dr. Tracy, you think sometimes? Because I know you're using billing codes, like
Right.
prepay.
Yeah. If you're if
If you're
you're if it's
cash, maybe.
right, if it's going through your insurance, then there are rules for insurance. If it's a cash pay provider, we have a little bit more flexibility with
Yeah, so
billing.
maybe you could ask somebody to prepay for a few sessions if you've got some FSA money and you know somebody who's open to that. Side note too, of course, that we're talking about more like official channels, but me and Angela are here with our communities, and we definitely like to talk about that angle as well, having supportive spaces where you can talk to other people about money. I think for us, we find there's a lot of people who, in an ideal world and situations, maybe would be seeing financial therapists and similar people, but they find spaces like ours as well. And if you can find high quality people to talk to, that can definitely help set you up on the right path
Yeah,
to getting
I have
closer.
referred so many people over the years to women's personal finance only because when you have money issues, money is such a taboo topic in our society. And what can often happen is you end up struggling alone, and it can feel really isolating and like you're the only person who's going through this, and no one else is going to understand, and no one knows how to help you or how to talk about what you're going through. And so communities like yours are really helpful for that.
It's wild how money is the thing that people will think about anything other than talking about money. Like,
Yeah.
talk about sex, talk about mental health, talk about like terrible relationship situations. People are way more likely to be like, this is my entire like drawer of red flags when it comes to relationships. But as soon as you talk to them about spending and money, it's all of a sudden
They
completely
shut down
frozen.
it
Yeah,
cricket. Yeah.
especially women. I mean,
Yes.
that's, where women's personal finance comes in, because most money spaces, even now, at best, are co-ed and mostly drowned out by cis male voices. And, that's why women's personal finance exists,
Yeah.
is because, even back in 2018, people were like, well, I don't even know who is talking about money from a female perspective. I'm sorry, I can't think of anyone. And, it is very different when you're able to ask questions in a place where someone isn't going to mansplain or talk down and belittle you
Yeah.
for, what might be a basic question or might not be a basic question. I've definitely seen in some of the co-ed groups, people getting completely like talked down to and dismissed, asking about like complex, mega backdoor Roth questions. So it's definitely important to have a place, especially if you're already dealing with money anxiety, anxiety and some financial trauma, to actually work up the courage to start asking questions. You need to be somewhere that you're going to be supported for asking them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about my clients and there is no way that they would even step into those rooms because they would be absolutely terrified to potentially be vulnerable in those spaces. And then you add on to that the complexities of our other identities, so race, sexual orientation, gender orientation, and the spaces that are safe get smaller and smaller. So I really appreciate the work that y'all do.
And for
So
anybody who's hopped on a little late, this is very much a discussion chat with Dr. Traci. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to address them.
So I'm curious about your clients. Who generally finds you and how do they find you and how do they get started? Because it seems like a lot of us could probably benefit from financial therapy, but you have to know to seek it out and decide that, you're worth spending the money and time on that it
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
to
And I tell
tackle it
people
head on.
I acknowledge that it is expensive. It's an investment for sure. I probably could have used a financial therapist at some point myself. That's usually what I tell people. I introduce myself, I say what I do, and then the response is, oh, I could use someone like you. And I'm like, I could have used someone like me too. What do my clients look like? For my practice, I see all ages. And so right now, my financial therapy folks, I would say that's about a third of my current caseload. I specialize in working with professionals and their families, so they tend to be on the higher income earning side. But most of my financial folks are currently women. And I think that that's because I'm a woman and they probably feel safer coming to a woman. Um, and I have about half of them are minorities. I'm also working with couples. So financial therapists can address a wide variety of things. So like I mentioned, I have a client who's sober. She's living sober and she's trying to get her money together after struggling through her addiction. I have one client who she grew up with no financial literacy, and now she's a high earner and she has absolutely no clue how to handle that or the feelings that come with that. There's a lot of guilt and shame when your family and the people around you are not earning as much as you do. Um, Let's see what else. I have a couple, they are trying to get on the same page. So helping couples with those conversations, which, I mean, if you bring two people who have two very different histories into a relationship together, and then you throw money into the mix, they can very easily butt heads if they don't know how to have the conversation around money. So that's just an idea. It can also include things like having experienced financial abuse, which tends to happen a lot in intimate partner violence situations. And so you've left that situation, you experienced financial abuse, and now you need to process that in order to move on with your life. It can mean working with people who have gambling addiction and hoarding, or who are married to or living with someone who have those disorders as well. It can also mean other things like helping people figure out their estate plan and how they're going to designate what they're going to do with their money. So it could be a whole host of things. If it's money related, there are probably emotions involved, and we can probably help.
Maura asked, what kind of results are financial planning therapy clients looking for or finding?
Yeah, generally speaking, my financial therapy clients want to feel more confident in their money decision making. They want to feel less anxious about their financial situation. My couples want to argue less about money. They want to feel more of a sense of security around money. Most of them are living paycheck to paycheck, or they're not budgeting. They don't have systems in place, most of them. And so that's oftentimes where we start off with creating plans. But yeah, that tends to be the results that they're wanting.
I want to talk a little bit more too about the, growing up lower income to making a lot more money, because I feel like we see quite a bit of that in WPF also, of people that are suddenly making either good money or great money. And it really is a bigger life change than I think we give it credit for. You were talking about the different money scripts with like money status and money worship. And I feel like that can kind of, those sound bad on their face, but it also is something that is very hard to like pull apart when all of a sudden you're making money. And it's really easy, I think, sometimes to dismiss people that have spent a lot of money on a flashy car or a flashy wardrobe when they grew up never being able to access those things. And it's a lot harder to say no to things that you never had access to when
Yeah,
you were
Yep.
young.
It's
absolutely.
not,
I
when
mean,
you didn't have the choice, it's very different. And
right.
actually, we can elaborate there, but would you say potentially even like moving from significantly different, like lower to higher socioeconomic status could almost be traumatic in and of itself? Like that's a major identity change,
Yeah.
and not just money scripts, but just a lot of cultural and other scripts that come from where you started. You may not have the skills, you don't know how to act. It,
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
that can be hard too. You have more money, but
absolutely.
that doesn't always make life easier.
Yeah, yeah. On the big scale, I think of professional athletes. And so you see they get drafted and they start making a bunch of money, and then you're seeing them they're wearing the latest and greatest, and they have the Rolex and the cars and the house and all of that stuff. And then next thing you know, you don't hear about them anymore, and it's because they've lost their money. That is on the bigger scale. For a lot of people who grew up without much and then started to have higher incomes, there are so many emotions that can come up around that, and it can feel really overwhelming, particularly if you didn't have access to financial literacy, which tends to be the case if you're growing up lower income. So, yeah, absolutely. Do you work with people who are terrified of the stock market? Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. Most of my clients, they know what the stock market is. They don't know how it works. I have one person who we're working through. She has severe financial anxiety. And when I say severe, I mean really like cannot stand to watch an ad on TV for like a bank. That severe. And so yeah, the idea of putting money in a stock market is just not at all a thing. Uh, I have a pretty significant financial trauma background and a late starter. It's really difficult to move money from savings to investing. Yes. So, Dawn, what I would say to you is try to learn more about how the stock market works from trusted sources. I like, what is it called? NPR has a podcast series. I think it's Life something, Life Simple. They have like a money podcast. I had just recommended it to one of my clients. Did it come up, Angela?
Planet Money, Life Kit Money.
Life Kit, yes.
Okay.
And so that is one of the sources that I trust for learning about how money works. And for me, I'm an immigrant. When I moved to this country, I moved for college. I didn't have family here, so I didn't have anybody to teach me the ropes. And when I graduated and I started working, they talked about signing up for the 401k. And I just threw some numbers on there. I didn't know what I was signing up for. It was not until years later I learned the 401k is investing in the stock market. I had no idea, no clue. And so getting information can be one way to start to feel a little bit more comfortable. Another thing that was really helpful for me when I read J.L. Collins' The Simple Path to Wealth, which I know is like a Bible in our section of the internet, being able to see the graph of the growth of stocks over time since way before I was born helped me to feel more comfortable in the fact that, okay, if I put my money in here, then I will be okay. The other thing that
I was going to say, he also has a guided meditation on
he
YouTube.
does.
For if the stock market's not doing well, you can actually go like listen and like have him talk you through it.
Yes,
which I think
and
is
his
just
guided
amazing.
meditation is right in line with what you would expect from like a mental health provider. I have also recommended that guided meditation. And it's also helpful to remind yourself that every single time the stock market has crashed thus far, it has recovered and has gone even higher than it was before. So that also helps. My depression era father strongly cautioned me to never invest in the stock market. And that makes complete sense because of the time in which he grew up. So yeah, I get it. I think it's also important to remind ourselves that was then, this is now. These are completely different times. My circumstance is completely different. We have to also acknowledge what the cost is to saving your money. If I put $5 under the mattress, it's going to lose its value and I'm going to have less than $5 in another 10 years. And that's not a risk that I'm willing to take.
Not to mention talking about the stock market, just how the public discussion around it is also much more intense and volatile than what a lot of us who take a much more boring approach deal with. So it sounds scary, even as somebody who doesn't have I don't mess with individual stock trading or any of that because yeah, it is scary, but but you don't hear it out being talked about that there are much safer, reliable ways that don't have quite the storminess that you can invest in because it doesn't read well. It's not exciting.
Right. Yeah. If you remember that the media's job is to make money off of your attention, then that will put things into perspective. If they're telling you that the sky is falling, you're going to be tuned in because you want to know everything about the sky falling. The best investor is the dead investor because they're not making any changes to their portfolio. They're not listening to CNNBC or whoever and making changes. So yes, know enough information, but then try not to get consumed by it. Okay, what else? Sky is falling conspiracy. Yeah. So the obsession with crypto and then the obsession with NFTs, and nobody's talking about NFTs anymore. And now I heard someone talking about I have to go buy gold and silver. And so all of these things are cyclical. And once you start to recognize the cycles, you learn what to tune into and what not to tune into.
I do like the comment that there are a lot more safeguards in place than there were.
Yes.
I mean, the Great Depression caused a lot of these safeguards to go in place. I mean, I think the bank failures we saw, what was that, last year? I don't know, time has no meaning anymore. The Silicon Valley Bank,
Oh, yes,
you
yes,
know,
yes.
it felt like this big giant thing. And in 1940, it would have been a much bigger thing. But because of the FDIC, I think that's probably a really good place to help, to start to help feel less stressed, is to go read what happened. We actually have a WPF insider who had some money in Silicon Valley Bank, and they were updating us on it through the process. And their money was like, I don't
It
remember,
was
Regina,
quick.
how long. It was really quick. Like, it was faster than I expected. And so it's like this big bank failed, and, you know, they had money in it, and it didn't matter. Like,
Yeah, they got their
it,
money back. Yeah.
yeah.
Within like a week or so. Like it
Wow.
was really quick. Yeah, they weren't missing. And just to, in case people aren't aware, yes, this bank failed, and the FDIC, the feds, all these, they had to step in to alleviate things and make sure that people had access to money, and prevent other banks kind of rippling out. And it sounded scary at first, but it was controlled very fast, and everybody involved is solvent. Maybe
Yeah.
not the
And
So
bank itself. I don't know
even
that
the
part,
people
but
that had, well, the bank closed, but
yeah.
even people who had more than the $250,000 limit, you know, that you're told, you know, it's insured up to that 250. But at least in this case, people who had more money than that in that bank still ended up being solvent through
yeah, because
the
there are
federal programs.
safeguards for even beyond that limit. So just to piggyback on that, in case anybody is not aware, when you're putting your money into some kind of an account, particularly if it's a checking account, whatever the case might be, you want to make sure that it is FDIC insured. It's an FDIC insured institution, so that if for whatever reason, I don't know, the bank blows up, your money's not gone with it, which is another reason why putting my $5 under the mattress doesn't really help, because if my house burns down, there goes my $5.
And I'm dropping it in the chat also, but you know, if you have a credit union, it's going to be NCUA, I believe is the term.
Yes.
So it's
Credit
like
union.
FDIC, but it's for credit unions.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
yes,
online
let's.
Dawn.
bank, yes.
So online banks also can, and most do, carry the FDIC insurance.
Mhm.
We're getting close to time, so we probably don't want to delve too deep in there. But yeah, there's also a lot of caution and nervousness sometimes about these fintech type things, and the way things are moving away from the brick and mortar. I know a lot of people, in the generation above me, who don't trust online banks, and they insist that they need to have a brick and mortar institution that they can transact with. I understand why they may feel that way, but the online banks, assuming they're FDIC insured, do have those same protections, Don.
Yeah. Yeah.
And online banks, you know, the brick and mortar banks are not keeping the like billions of dollars they hold on premises
On
anyway.
site, no.
So, you know, it might feel like more safer that you can touch and feel the bank branch, but they're not keeping a whole bunch of money. Most of the money is, you know, in the cloud basically at this point, whether or not you're in an online bank. I do want to say though that Venmo, PayPal, the
Are not
like
banks.
cash transfer places are not banks. So if
Right.
you keep your money in your Venmo account and Venmo closed for some reason, that money is not protected.
Right.
So more than concerning yourself between a brick and mortar and online bank, we would suggest really not keeping money in those cash transfer places because those are not protected.
And that falls in line with the topic of prevention. Preventing experiencing a financially traumatic event means knowing as much as you can about what you're doing with your money, where you're putting your money. Because if you understand it, you can then say with certainty, I feel really comfortable about this decision. Making decisions that you feel comfortable about, that's another one, because if you're not so sure, if it feels iffy, then there probably is a reason why it feels iffy. And going with people who are trusted, not just someone's uncle on TikTok is usually the thing that I say, just because you never know where that information is coming from or where your money is going to end up. Having a cushion can also help if you do experience a financially traumatic event, because then that cushion can help to tide you over between that event and getting back on your feet. Any other ideas for prevention that come to mind?
Well, and maybe not so much prevention, but especially when you're starting investing in the stock market, even if, you're not doing individual stocks, you're going with like a total stock market index fund, which is, unless the world completely blows up, is pretty secure.
Yeah.
I've suggested that people start with, maybe you only invest $10 or $100 a month and just get used to it and get used to the feeling. There's nothing that says you have to transfer all of your money that's in cash into the stock market all at once.
Yeah. In the
Dollar
therapy
cost
world,
investing is a real
yeah.
thing. And while the math says to dump it all in at once, we all know here that money is way more than just math. So, baby steps, dip your
Yes.
toe in.
In the therapy world, we call that exposure therapy. So just
Exactly.
a little bit at a time, baby steps, and you slowly become more comfortable.
Does
All right,
anybody have
we're
any?
close to our
Yeah.
time. Yep. So, if anybody has any last questions, or Dr. Traci, if there's anything you want to address that we haven't covered yet to kind of wrap us up.
Let's see. My favorite spot on the internet right now is TikTok until maybe it is banned. We'll see if there's a buyer. So I'm on there at Healthy Wealthy Roots. My private practice is Poui Consulting. It's POUI. Right now, I am running on a wait list. So if I am not an option for you, there are lots of other options out there who are just as good as I am, I promise. Yeah, I love this.
And
I love
I
talking about
dropped
money.
the link to your
Website.
website, and I will also include it when I upload this to YouTube. I will drop it there for those who are watching this later and want to find Dr. Traci.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for being a part of the WPF community. We
Yeah,
really
absolutely. Mariah
love
is
how many
asking
people.
about wanting to become a financial therapist. Yeah, absolutely. Send me an email. I answer that question all the time.
So maybe on our upload on Woven, can we include your email? I don't know that we want to put that on the YouTube video.
It's
Right.
on her website.
Oh, it's
It's
on
on
the
my
website.
website. So if
Perfect.
Yeah.
someone
Okay.
actually wanted to email me, it's there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.